Yes, yes, it's recording. Okay, and I guess we can start whenever you guys are ready. It's all yours.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pastor Traci Jackson, and welcome to Boston Praise Radio. We are here live talking with our guest today, Dr. Wendy Mahoney. I am your host this afternoon on Living Well, Pastor Traci Jackson. In my far left-hand corner is Deacon Jerome.
Hello, everyone, and good Grand Rising and good afternoon to everyone, especially to you, Pastor Wendy.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
And our co-host is none other than Pastor Hobbs, who is here with us. We've invited him to be part of today's conversation. Welcome, Pastor Hobbs.
Thank you so much. My honor and privilege to be with you. Blessings, Pastor, and all.
Thank you so much. We're excited that you're here with us. We are here every third Sunday of the month from 4 to 5, bringing you all things living well. Today, we are honored to have a special guest with us all the way from Jackson, Mississippi. We love technology because we've got her right here live for you to have a conversation with us today. And we didn't have to fly her here. Although I want her to come here, but we didn't have to fly her here today. And so she is none other than Dr. Wendy Mahoney. Dr. Mahoney has over 30 years of experience in the nonprofit and social services field. She is the interim president and CEO of the National Network to End Domestic Violence. She has held leadership positions as executive director for the Mississippi Coalition Against Domestic Violence, executive director for Mississippi Families as Allies for Children's Mental Health, and executive director for the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Mississippi. Dr. Mahoney's vast array of experience and success come from her years of nonprofit management, program development, grant writing, direct service, school administration, community leadership, and development. She also does work in cultural responsiveness and personal and professional development training. She has traveled extensively throughout the U.S. and is a resource for many different agencies around her work in strategic planning. Dr. Mahoney has been published in many different publications, and she serves as a mentor for young girls who are going into adulthood by providing experiential and life skill development opportunities. She is the fiance of an amazing bishop. She is the mother of 2 wonderful daughters. She is a grandmother. She is a pastor. She is a woman of faith, and I am so incredibly proud to say that she is one of my closest friends. Welcome, Dr. Mahoney.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Traci. I appreciate it. It is an honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you for the invite. It's always wonderful to be amongst you and others, Pastor Hobbs and Deacon Jerome, so that we could spread the word in many different ways. So I'm excited. I'm really excited. I love to be able to share and talk about things that people need to know and expand their knowledge base on various topics and information.
Wow. Yay. Well, thank you so much. You know what? We're thrilled to have you here. Dr. Mahoney and I actually met when I was doing some work for the coalition, when she was still the ED of the coalition. I was doing some training in Mississippi. I think we were in
Mendenhall, Mississippi.
We were in Mendenhall,
in a little small town. Yes.
We were. And I have to say that I had heard about her, but had not met her. So we had been training in another part of Mississippi the day prior, 2 days prior, maybe. And on our final day of training, I was able to meet her in person at this training. And I will say that she walked into the room and her presence was such that I thought, this has to be the infamous Wendy Mahoney. This has to be her. And we actually met in the kitchen at lunch. I went into the kitchen at this particular space where we were training And I don't know why I went in the kitchen, but it was God's divine appointment. I went in the kitchen and all we said was hello. And after all the, you look fabulous. No, you look fabulous. No, I love your shoes. After all of that, we began to talk. And before I knew it, we were running around that kitchen, speaking in tongues, hands up, praising God. And we have been doing all of that ever since.
Ever since, literally ever since.
It was immediate. And so I'm just so grateful for all the years of her friendship, her love, her support. And so I wanted to say all of that before we started talking about who she is as a professional, because I think sometimes, you know, we hear what people do professionally and then we determine that that's who they are. That's what they do. Who she is everything else that I can say about her. And there's so much more, but we only have a short time. And I really want to talk with her about the amazing work that she's doing. So right now she is the national, she's working for the National Network to End Domestic Violence as their president and COO. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, the interim president and CEO of the
CEO,
national.
okay.
Yep.
And so we call it NNEDV in our work, but it is the National Network to End Domestic Violence. So I want you to tell us about this role, first and foremost. Then I want you to talk a little bit with us about what are some of the challenges. And then I want you to end, just as you're talking about this work, by telling us what you hope to leave there. What is it you hope to?
Okay. Well, first I'd say, the position is very great. It's an honor for me to sit at the helm of a national organization. I have been the executive director of 3 statewide organizations, but we know that God brings about promotion. And I started this journey in October of last year, being asked to sit and be the interim. The National Network to End Domestic Violence is a national organization that supports every coalition, that's domestic violence coalitions throughout the country and U.S. territories. So there are 56 coalitions that are members of NNEDB, and we provide technical assistance in helping the programs run, but more than anything, making sure that our coalitions have the resources to support in their state to support survivors. But because at the core of our work, it's about survivors. We have a vast array of resources and services that we provide, everything from technology safety. We know that technology is so vast, just as Pastor Traci said, I'm able to be right there with you, we all together today. But technology, people can use it as a vice to abuse even further victims of domestic violence. So we have a technology department that even talks about confidentiality, because a lot of times we don't realize that the rights that survivors have, they don't even know a lot of their rights. We have a women's law program, and women's law is a team of 8 attorneys, and the attorneys work with every state and U.S. territory to make sure that their laws are put in place correctly and that survivors know what their rights are. When you want a protection order or if you want a divorce, what are the resources that are available in each particular state or U.S. territory? We provide all types of technical assistance, everything from supporting coalitions around issues, systemic issues that they may be dealing with in their own states. We have an economic justice project called the Independence Project, where we do microloans to survivors to help them build their credit scores so that they can get an apartment, so they can purchase a vehicle and different things like that. So the organization is set up nationally. We do a lot of policy work. We work on the Hill to make sure that policies that impact survivors, we're looking at those and making sure that they don't do any further harm. So the organization has it's quite vast. We have staff from California to Puerto Rico. We have 3 staff that are in Puerto Rico. So we do a lot of different work, and sitting at the helm of the organization has afforded me the opportunity to take what I know and from a coalition point of view, from a survivor point of view, and look at all these various systems that intersect everything from mental health to our criminal justice system, and how sometimes our survivors have to go through the system and all they've been doing is trying to protect themselves. So we look at a lot of different things within the organization. It has been a role for me that has been a blessing. It has also been challenging. As a Black woman, running a national organization is different than running a state organization in your own state. So we know I've said over and over again, with this comes some challenges. However, I know that if God ordained me for the assignment, He also ordained me for the attacks. And so the attacks have come fast and furious. However, I keep in mind that the assignment before me and stay focused. So I've been able to do that. And what I want to leave at the organization, I always say every place I am is a stepping stone to the next place that I'm going. Therefore, what I want to leave is something that impacts not just one individual, but many individuals. Looking at it from a systems point of view, being able to look at the continuum that a survivor may experience, everything from the need for housing to mental health to other resources. I want to be able to connect all of the systems on the national level that we have not done before. I think we do the work sometimes in our states because we know, oh, we can pull this person, we know this group, we know law enforcement, we may know social services, we know these entities, but we have not done it on a national level to bring about a level of change that would impact the lives of survivors and really bring about change. We can't continue to do the same thing that we've been doing time and time again. It makes no sense. It makes no sense to have all these resources in place and we not have strategy to be most effective. And so that's what I want to leave the organization. And I have to say, being the interim, you look at things from a certain lens because they say interim, meaning, you may not be here very long, but as I've been at the organization, I've been able to look at things from a certain lens to be able to say, this is what we need to do to bring about change for survivors. So the work that is done nationally, and even our organization touches internationally. We have a project in Rwanda right now, the Rwanda Women's Network, that we're working with women who are impacted by HIV and AIDS. And so we're looking at Black women in other countries who are impacted by HIV and AIDS and the intersection between HIV and AIDS and domestic violence. So it is so much to look at and so much to do, but I believe that I am placed there for a time such as this to be able to look at the systems and come up with different strategies to be as effective and impactful as possible.
Wow.
Absolutely fire.
Amazing. Pastor Wendy,
Yes.
one of the things that I understand that at the core of your work is mainly for survivors, but one of the things I've heard the pastor in reading your bio, one of the many things you do, I understand that you have basically some insight into mental health is one of those things that you're one of the many things you have expertise in as well. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I had most of my professional career before diving into domestic violence about 12 years ago was mental health. So I've been in the mental health arena as a therapist, also working in children's mental health. NAMI Mississippi, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Mississippi is a chapter of the National Alliance, and really looking at mental health it's on a continuum. And you hear me talk about continuum because everything is on a continuum. You have mild to severe. So in mental health, we don't talk about it very often, but your mental health can be impacted or affected and you not have a mental illness. So every situations and circumstances in which we encounter may impact or affect your mental health. However, it's not a mental health diagnosis. And that's why I say it's on a continuum. It's everything from getting into an argument with your significant other, dealing with issues of grief, all the way to schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And so it's everything in between. And as a society, there's such a huge stigma on mental illness, or even saying your mental health. And and a lot of times people just throw that term around, my mental health is affected. But how is it affected? What is going on? How does it change how you see yourself, how you feel? We say, oh, I feel this way, but do we really understand the core of those feelings and how it impacts our work, our daily life, skills, and your ability to function effectively? Because if your mental health is affected, you have to realize that you're not at your optimal self. And so if you are affected by domestic violence, of course, you're going to deal with some mental health challenges and behaviors. Because if someone is abusing you, and you're being abused, and you're having to figure out how to manipulate and maneuver. And a lot of times survivors, people get upset and they're like, oh, they manipulate. Yeah. If somebody's abusing you and you got to try to figure out how to live in that situation, and you're trying to figure out how to just breathe every day, yeah, you might have to manipulate and tell a lie to, or figure this out, or maneuver. I went to this store when I really had to go here, 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 whatever the case is. So your mental health is affected. People don't understand that mental health is a core part of who we are. And that is your cognitive and emotional well-being. You may hear people talk about your emotional intelligence. Some people's emotional intelligence can be very high, then others can be very low based on their life situations and circumstances. Because life and the impact of how we dealt with it impacts how you exhibit your emotions. So those are things that when it comes to mental health, there's so many things. I mean, everything from growing up, and I talk about this in many talks, is that everything from growing up, and when you're told, go sit your blank down, or, parents parenting, because you only can give out what you have and what you've experienced. And so what we tend to do, I mean, and I can go on and on, y'all can hear that. The generational things that we don't stop. So you only behave the way that how you were treated and what you do, unless we stop it. And that's what we're here to do even today, is to be able to stop some of the things that have happened generationally to people that we continue to deal with day in and day out. And we wonder, well, why does this person act this way? Why are they behaving in that way? Why are they so angry? Why are they so irritated? Why are they frustrated? Why this, that, or the other? Is because of what happened to them, but not only what happened, how it happened, how they processed what happened.
Yes.
And that's when you get the results. And that's the behavior that you see. Because you think about it, and I say this in speeches too, people laugh about it. I say, with teachers, I did trainings for teachers for many years. I say, do you really think that Johnny woke up and wanted to be defiant, curse you out, and get out of his seat every day? No, he did not. That was not his intent. But because of what he has experienced, he doesn't have the words or the internal resources to process what he's going through. So you're going to see behavior. We all see behavior. And that's the stuff about individuals or people that we tend to say, I don't, I don't like that. Why they so angry? Why they mean? Why this, that, and other? But there's a core to that. And then even if we relate that spiritually, right, we could dig even deeper when it comes to that, because how we're dealt with and what things we have experienced bring about these particular behaviors. So mental health is extremely important. And in the church, we don't talk about it. Socially, we don't talk about it.
Tough
But
for
it's
the
those
And it's tough
part.
in the church. And I said it's tough in the church too. You know what I mean? When you see and you recognize that someone may be going through something, and it may not just be the outlier, what you see on outward. You see that behind it, it's some mental health in there too, whether it's their health issue and they got a mental health issue. You know what I mean? And so, but how does that? It's tough for the church. So how should the church handle it?
Well, you know what?
Talk,
I
what,
always say this. So how do church deal with it? Yeah, we know that we can pray, we can fast, because some things only come out through fasting and praying. We know that. That's the word. That's the word. But the other thing is that the church has to start acknowledging that these things exist. That everything that happens in our world, when we show up on a Sunday or Wednesday or Thursday, whatever day it is, those same issues that are out there in the world show up in the church because we show up. So we have to stop saying it doesn't exist, because it does. The issues exist because people exist, and we cannot separate the two. So what we have to do is to recognize in the church that these things are real and that people need help because they don't know what to do. One of the terms I say, where there's help, there's hope. Where there's hope, there's help. The reality of it is that we have to recognize as leaders that these things exist. And what we need to do is to be able to say, let's talk about these things openly and honestly. We can pray, we can fast, but also God has given us the wisdom and the insight into everything. He's given us stories in the Bible from the beginning to the end. And there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new, nothing new. So we as leaders have to recognize, and we have to stand up. I tell people all the time, I say, you know what? If the church did everything that we needed to do, there would not be a social service system. We would be it. We would be it. So we've gotten away from some of those key things that we know that our members are facing. People are facing their children right now, oh, they don't need to be on the IEP at the school. Well, yes, they might need to be on the IEP so we can figure out what's going on with the child. Let's do an assessment. We have to do an assessment. You have to look at things and figure out what it is so we have a strategy to address it. Oh, all they doing is just medicating. Some of them they are, but with wisdom, knowledge, and insight, you'll be able to figure out, does this child really need to be on meds, or do they need a behavior modification plan? Okay, sister so-and-so, she can't sleep at night. Okay, so what is it? Well, what's tormenting her? So does she? Yeah, she might need to have a little something to sleep at night. Yeah, she might need that. And it may not be forever. See, that's the other thing. Oh, I don't want to be this for the rest of my. No, you don't have to. But if you have faith and believe, okay, I'm gonna take this for 3 months. So this how I talk to God. This how I do things. Okay, now look, God. Okay, the doctor said this. Okay, so about 3 months, this is what we do. If the doctor say this and I believe by faith, mix it with my faith, then I won't have to take that anymore because I believe the word of God. If he said by his stripes I were healed, and if he said it in his word, then it's so. But I got to have faith to believe that with that, I'm healed. So we have to do the work in the church to bring about change, to look at mental health in a different way. And because people experience so many traumatic life experiences, that we have to address those things that they encounter in order for us to be better able to assist them with various tools. Because everything may not just be one thing that you have to use to deal with that situation. You may need multiple things to be able to combat the issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Wendy. I'm thinking to myself as I'm listening to you that, the mental health conversation is one that, you know, we have really been trying to have in the church for a really long time, but we've also been trying to have the conversation about domestic violence. We've also been trying to have the conversation about sexual assault. We've also been trying to have the conversation about HIV and AIDS, right? And we want to talk about the intersectionality of all of those things, right? Because oftentimes in our community, as you said, it's no one thing people are dealing with, right? It is not just that one thing. More often than not, it is compound and complex trauma that people are dealing with. And I struggle to understand, and I'm not sure you have the answer or that any of us do, but I struggle to understand wherein lies the shame in getting help. Wherein lies this, where is that? Where, you know, what is it about getting help that's so hard for us, right? That we just can't say, you know what, I'm struggling in this area, or this isn't working for me. And you know, I think it's interesting. I've had people say to me, you know, one of the hardest things they ever had to do was go to their pastor and say that there was domestic violence in their relationship or that they'd been sexually assaulted. But I feel like as spiritual leaders, we ought to give space for people to have those conversations with us. And the only way that happens is that we openly have the conversations from the pulpit, right? That we talk about
Absolutely.
things like it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. What are we doing as a congregation? It's Sexual Assault Awareness Month. What are we doing as a congregation? I'm inviting someone here to come and talk about some of the resources in our community so that our congregation members are led to feel as if anything they have need of, as you said, the church is the resource place where they can get those resources, they can get services that they need, and that there's no shame attached to it. If we don't figure out a way to disattach the shame, then people are always going to feel as if they cannot come to the table and say something's wrong. You know, and at Wellspring, as you know, we tell people it's not what's the matter with so and so, it's what happened to them. It's what happened to them, because until we address the root issue, the behavior is just symptomatic of the real root issue. And so I struggle, as you do, I know, as a pastor, to find the space for us to be able to do this in a holistic way, so that yes, we're addressing people's spiritual needs, but we're going to address all the other needs, the natural needs that they have as well, because Jesus did. He did. And he, you know, he sat down the multitudes and fed them before he preached.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the shame is multifaceted in and of itself. You're right. I don't think any of us can deal with it. I think we can just hammer away with it bit by bit and chisel it away. One is people have to trust that they can uh, give that part of themselves, open up that part of themselves, whatever it is. It goes back generationally. You think way back that there are certain things that went on to people. All of those acts were done in secret, in silence. So, rape, incest, uh, if someone had a mental illness or something, even thinking about in the Bible, you know, you were cast away, you were put aside, you were not to be seen if something were transpiring with you. So it goes back so very far and it's so deep. So what we have to do is ask God for those strategies. And first being transparent and saying that it's okay. You know, this is a safe place to be able to talk about it, because the shame comes is one thing. But when you open up yourself and you're vulnerable in that way, you want to make sure that no further harm is done. Think about our trauma informed work. Pastor Traci talks about that's that part of it. We are not to do any further harm, and people need to know that the church will not do further harm, because we have experienced things that are contrary to that, and it does further harm. So we have to make sure that we are transparent and we continue to give the message that it's okay, this is a safe place. And sometimes it may not be a safe place, but is it a brave place that you show up bravely to be able to bring that information, and then we work on it being more safe, as we move. But you want it to be a brave space that people can show up and be able to talk about those things that are inherently deeply rooted, sometimes in the fabric of their families, in the community, and otherwise. So the shame is deep. It's very, very deep. You know what I'm saying? It is something you really don't want to be able to tell that. All you know is that you want to be free. And
Amen.
that's the thing that it helps me sometimes to keep at the center, is not looking at the behavior or things like that, but know at the core of most people, their desire is to be free, to be free of the abuse, the hurt, the pain, the disappointment, the rejection, the abandonment, and all of those various things.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think when I first started in this work, one of the things that was said to me is that it's safe to assume that everybody comes with some form of trauma. That's a safe assumption, right? And even though we don't all wear a big T on our forehead that says I'm a trauma survivor, the truth of the matter is we all come with some form of trauma. And sometimes people will say, "Oh, well, I don't think I have that kind of story. Nothing really happened to me." And then you start naming things, right? Well, did you ever get a call at work that a loved one died? Did you ever find a loved one dead on the scene? Did you ever, you know what I mean? And as you start to think about those things, you survive lots of traumas, right? You've had a bad car accident, trauma, anything that disrupts your normal is trauma. And so we all survive it every day, all day, right? That's just part of life. I say to people all the time, if you live in the city of Boston and you drive, trauma, you're a trauma survivor. Because there ain't nothing more traumatic than driving in the city of Boston, except maybe driving in the city of New York. I'm not sure. But, the reality is that we all survive lots of traumas. And the difference is, and I think you said this earlier, Dr. Wendy, is how we process it. The difference is whether or not we're given space to process it in a way that is healthy. And the difference is whether or not we have that spiritual component, and some people have the spiritual component and don't put it to use, right? They don't even fully understand that the Holy Spirit is there to help you, to process life, right? That's exactly what he is there for. He is there to lead and guide us into all truth. And there is that. And one of my favorite things, and I say this to people all the time when I'm counseling them, is when you cannot forgive something or someone in and of yourself, you can give the Holy Spirit permission to forgive through you. He can do the work. You don't have to. You don't have to. There are some things truly that will happen to us in our lifetimes that we will never be able to get over. At best, we might be able to learn to live with it, but we won't even be able to do that without the help of the Holy Spirit. So I'm glad that that Deacon Jerome asked the question about what is the church's role as it relates to mental health. But I also want to talk about the church's role as it relates to domestic and sexual violence too, because as you know, in communities of color, and in immigrant communities, the church is the nucleus of the community, right? It is the place that people are going for whatever their needs are. We know that in community colors, victims in communities of color, victims and survivors are 5 times more likely to disclose to a faith leader than they are to go to a service provider. So how, and I'm asking, all of us to think about this, how do we bring the church on board with the work of domestic and sexual violence? I know in most Black churches, we don't even talk about healthy sexuality. They don't even bring that up in marriage, premarital counseling. I don't even know what that's all about. I do. So I tell people, if you don't want me to be in your business, don't ask me to do premarital counseling with you, because I will ask everything. But I do believe that we have to find a way to bring it in a healthy context. I get it. Most of us learn it in a way that's not healthy, and it is negative, and it's secretive, and it's deemed to be dirty, and all that other stuff. But now we're talking about in the confines of marriage, in a healthy context, where the Bible says that the marriage bed is undefiled. And so now, how do we help people come to a healthy place so that when something is happening that isn't healthy, they know that there is in fact something wrong, and they feel free to have a conversation about it. And the same with domestic violence. We're doing this premarital counseling with folks, we're marrying people, and the church's divorce rates are exactly the same as the world. What are we doing wrong? And why are we not bringing people into a space and a place where they have some context for what God's design for marriage is, and then they have the skills and the tools, as we say in our work, to carry that out? Pastor Hobbs, Deacon Jerome, Pastor Wendy, we're going to come up with some answers in the next 15 or 20 minutes and change the world.
Well, Pastor Hobbs, have you experienced in your church any of this? And how difficult has it been, or how has you navigated if you ever deal with it?
The short answer is yes. Not actually Well, the short answer is yes, I have. Obviously, the ministry that got us birthed through me healing our land was birthed out of a response specifically to that. And so I
Mm,
would submit the first thing was, quite candidly, it not being something abstract from my life, but it being my own testimony. Pastor Traci Jackson talked about transparency, right? So the truth of the matter, though I'm the firstborn son of a Pentecostal bishop, been brought up and raised in church, I I had to disclose my own story, right, of incest, right, of being a person who was a victim of of abuse, right, even within the church, even within family kind of stuff that just happens that we don't talk about, right. So, but it took HIV and AIDS, quite candidly, a diagnosis of death sentence 25 years ago when it was a death sentence, for me to be desperate enough, right, when the church was ignorant with regard to that, to be, and I ran a support group for HIV positive men of color who were desperately saying they wanted to disclose, though they could get medication here, Dr. Mahoney in Massachusetts, right? It was first state in the country with healthcare, but what they couldn't do was disclose in the context of their faith and their race. That was integral to their identity through all the trauma they'd experienced to this point. Now you get a death sentence, and the church was ignorant even with how to be able to respond to that because of their own fear. So I would submit that really, the way to deal with it is that we've got to be honest and tell our own authentic testimony.
yes, yes,
That creates a space when it's no longer those people, but it's me. It's my son, my daughter, my brother, my friend. Then it changes our perspective. Now we want to respond. And quite candidly, when we do that, we'll find that because what happened is other people started to come to you privately and say, some part of your story is
Right.
mine too. Thank
Mhm.
you, because I've been struggling alone, privately suffering.
mm,
But because you shared that,
yes,
now I can come to you. And
that,
again, that confidentiality. And then we started to have forums, right? And do this on being very intentional, right? And being able to do stuff quite candidly outside of the structure of the organized church, right? And we started to being able to have forums. I understood the church culture. So we'd have choirs come and sing, and they would come because they were happy to come and sing because we had relationship. So people were like, oh, yeah, let's come, we'll sing. But the truth of the matter is, they were coming out of the auspices of, we're going to come help support you, when everybody in that choir needed to be in there, not just to minister and sing, but to be able to hear and to also have places that you could now start to open up and talk about you needing help. So I would
Mhm.
submit that those are the ways that we've got to be able to stop sanitizing our testimony, right? That it's palatable to people who want to affirm us.
I love that you use the word sanitizing, because that is something that we say very much in the work of domestic and sexual violence, that victims and survivors are forced to sanitize their experiences. Nobody wants to go to their pastor or spiritual leader and use the ugly language of domestic violence or sexual assault. Nobody wants to be able to do that, but I caution faith leaders that you need to be able to hear it. Because if you
Yes.
don't hear it the way that it's really happening, then you are minimizing violence that could be life or death for someone. Because when victims and survivors sit in my office, or in any of the coalitions that Dr. Mahoney is now covering and supporting, we hear the ugly language of what's really happening. As a pastor, I might get he hurt my feelings. As a service provider, I get he dragged me down the stairs by my hair. And that's a whole different
mm,
conversation. And as a pastor, if I did not know better, I would be thinking that this might require marital counseling. Maybe we just need to have a conversation and some support, where that literally could be a death sentence for someone, right? And so pastors, I think oftentimes, spiritual leaders oftentimes are of the belief that service providers break up families. And service providers are often of the belief that faith leaders minimize violence and want to keep people together. Right? By nature, I think as spiritual leaders, we're fixers. We like it all to work out. We want to believe. We teach people that with God, all things are possible, and that there's nothing too hard for God. But we need to be honest with them and step in at some point in time and say, you know what, with God, all things are possible, but you need to pack your things and leave.
That's
Because
right.
right now I fear for your safety. I fear for the safety of your children. If your children continue to witness this violence, they are going to be 5 times more likely to be violent offenders themselves. So, Dr. Mahoney, you jump in because, I could go on about this all day.
Well, I was gonna, piggyback on what Pastor Hobbs said, the transparency, as leaders, I have no problem saying, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I tell people that.
Yes.
I'm in the work because I am a survivor. I was in mental health. I was also in mental health because I'm a survivor, because I have
Yes.
mental health in my family. Mental illness is deeply rooted in my family.
Yes.
In domestic violence because my mother was in a domestic violence marriage. I grew up in a domestic violence household. So, just being honest, I don't have a problem telling my story because we are relational people and we identify with experiences just as people we do. So, I have to tell my story. I have to be able to open up and say, this is what happened to me because I didn't want to marry a man like my father. I married a man like my father. And so, did I understand the abuse initially? No. Once I was in it, did I even know it was abuse? I knew I didn't like it. I knew something wasn't quite right. So we have to be able to identify as leaders, open up the door for the conversation, but be transparent about our own experiences. And we know that in many cases, about a lot of different things, that people don't identify with it unless they've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And but there's so many things that we have experienced that we can identify with. And Pastor Traci said it. Trauma of all kinds exists. But one of the things when it comes to domestic violence and sexual assault, think about it. It comes in the confines of what we've been told for so many years. What goes on in this house stays in this house. But what goes on in this house impacts other people outside of this house. That's the stuff we need to talk about. Absolutely. We have to talk about that part, that because it was kept silent, because it's tearing me up on the inside, it's also impacting others that are around me or that I'm close to, because I don't know how to deal with this thing that's on the inside of me that I've suppressed and that I've held on to and not had a place that I thought that I could go to and talk about it openly and honestly. It's just so deep and it's so vast. Sexual violence, sexual assault, it goes back, even in the word, Tamar, if you go back there and just what she experienced, and I'll say that was one of the first accounts of sexual assault that was clearly identified in the word.
In the Bible.
And she knew, how do I deal with this? From the passages, you could tell she dealt with depression. She didn't even know what to do with, who do I tell? How do I even articulate this to my brother that my brother did this to me? So even understanding and taking that apart and looking at the Bible and the word in reference to how it transpired, knowing that, again, there's nothing new under the sun, but where we are today, we should be further along in dealing with it, opening it up. And, our organization says the National Network to End Domestic Violence. How can we end? There's a National Alliance to End Sexual Assault. How do we end it? How do we end it? First of all, we got to talk about it. There's nothing that can be dealt with unless you open up and have a conversation about it. You spread light. You open it up to say, this behavior is unacceptable. This will not happen on my watch. This will not happen in my community. And talk to our children about what it is. Have conversations, because these are the number one things that impact our society that we don't talk about, and that's domestic violence and sexual assault. And I
Remove
don't
it.
understand in 2024,
Mhm.
the number one issue, we don't have platforms and conversations to talk about these things in a way to be able to end it. And I'd have to say this: mental health or mental illness is not it that doesn't cause someone to be violent. Let's just break that down right now. Let's just shut that myth down that is not a cause. Sexual assault and domestic violence are learned behavior. They're learned behavior because if you don't know how to adapt or deal with a situation, you use your control, your power and control, something that's on the inside of you, to demean, degrade someone else. Use your power over them.
Mm.
That's what those things are rooted in. And until we get to the root of a thing and get to the core of it,
Yes.
we're not going to be able to deal with it as a society, as a church, or anything. Let's deal with the core of it. Let's deal with the root of it. Going back, even in my own situation of being married, my ex-husband used his power within the relationship to demean, degrade me. He used his power to tell me I was nothing, or that I didn't know what I was talking about. I could go out and speak to thousands of people like I'm doing just right now. And I get home and be told that how many times I said, how many times I didn't communicate, articulate that I was nothing. When I was sexually assaulted on a college campus, a senior, and I was a freshman, he used his power and control because he was the big man on the campus. He was an alpha. He was this, he was that on campus. Power and control.
Amen. Mhm.
That's the root of it. And we have to
Mhm.
deal with it.
We have to. We have to. We do. We have to, and we have to hold offending behavior. We have to hold people accountable for it and stop excusing it and justifying it and making it about things that it's really not about. And I'm so glad you put the emphasis on the fact that it is not about mental health issue. It is not anger run amok, because that's the other thing people like to believe. You know, I think we make a lot of excuses, and I call them excuses because that's what they are to me. Anything that means I don't take ownership for my own behavior, to me, is an excuse. So when we're making excuses and justifications for why people are angry or frustrated, my concern with that is that you're not punching in the guy in the face at the gas station. You're not at, at the A&P slapping people in the face. Excuse me, that this behavior is directed to one person, an intimate partner, one person, right? So you're exhibiting that power and control in one relationship and one relationship only. And to me,
Correct.
someone who has to exhibit control is really internally out of control, right? Because when I'm in control of me, I don't have to be in control of anything or anybody else. I'm good. I control what's happening over here with Traci. Everybody else, do what you want. But when I don't feel in control of myself, when I don't feel secure within myself, when I don't own myself and my world is spiraling out of control, I have to exhibit control where and when I can. And I'm going after the weakest link, and that is in an intimate partner relationship so that I can control what's happening there. I'm so glad we're talking about this. And I want to bring up another point, Dr. Wendy, and that is about, for a lot of victims and survivors, you said it about yourself, you didn't have language for what you were experiencing. And for a lot of victims and survivors, I think that if someone's not hitting them, they don't necessarily deem it to be abuse, right? Well, he never hit me. I hear that probably, 100 times a year when I'm working with victims and survivors. He's never hit me. But they're describing other behaviors that you and I know in this work are controlling behaviors, right? They are behaviors. And we know that they are building upon the more overt forms of violence, right? It might start with a look. It might start with a tone. It might start with a raised voice, but ultimately it's going somewhere, because as that person is not able to gain control in the relationship, they're going to keep working toward whatever is necessary to gain control in the relationship. So I want to talk about how do we help victims and survivors, and not just the victims and survivors, but even in terms of educating our communities. how do we, and the church, help them understand that it's not always physical?
Right, right. And it's financial abuse. Because I think it's that you can identify with someone hitting you, because violence in our community is normalized. Hitting is normalized. We see it. You can go on Facebook, any Instagram, any day, and you scroll a couple times. Somebody gonna hit somebody, and it's normalized. So we keep scrolling. But what people are not understanding is that when somebody degrades you, they humiliate you. Um, as you just said, Pastor Traci, a tone, that look, shut your mouth, you don't have nothing to say. Uh, Psychological abuse, that's the part that it messes with your mind. It makes you think that you did. Did I just say no? No, I said such and such. No, you said such and such, and it causes you to second guess and think, did I say that? Didn't I say? No, I thought I said this. Or they will move something or put something in one of the scenarios that I used to use in doing trainings, is that especially someone who is in law enforcement. And I give this example for a reason. They already exhibit control within the community. But if you come home and you throw your gun on the table and your taser, and you already are giving your partner certain looks or whatever, that psychologically, you don't know if he's gonna pick it up. If they're gonna pick it up, they're gonna use it against you. So in your mind, you're always thinking, are they gonna use that against me? So it messes with your psyche, it messes with your mind. The verbal, the saying the things, financial abuse. I even tell you, abuse, spiritual abuse, where I was told over and over again with the word, what the word said, what the word said. One time I was asked with a little coercion to stay home from work, because we were supposedly fasting and praying for a whole week. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. And you know the difference when it's ordained by God to fast and do that such. But this was coerced. No, you're not going to work. This is what we're doing. God said this. God said you're supposed to obey your husband, this, that, or the other, and put all those things in place. Spiritual abuse. We don't talk about that either. The financial abuse, where you can't even use your own paycheck. You know what I'm saying? You're limited to what you can purchase, what you can buy. You can't have your own money. Withholding basic needs such as food, water, clothing, that type of thing. Those are other forms of abuse that people don't even realize. They may understand it, just something just doesn't feel right about this, but to really understand that it is abuse in the form that we're talking about, just not the physical. And again, it's on a continuum, because it could be very small and it builds. Always know that abusers are strategic,
Very.
very strategic, and they know the tactic that'll work. They know the thing because they study you well enough to know. That's why I say it's learned behavior, because you have to figure this thing out. Then you study in a person to figure out what area that I could attack the greatest and get the greatest impact to feed their own internal issues.
Amen. Yeah, that is, thank you, Dr. Wendy, for sharing that. We are so winding down our time, and I knew this was going to be hard. I feel like we should have planned on 2 hours as opposed to an hour, because this is a conversation that could go on and on and on, especially because we know that as this airs and as it's shared, we want it to have an impact on our communities, right? We want someone to hear it and recognize themselves in it. As I listen to you, I think of victims and survivors who talk to me about their spouse withholding emotion from them, right? I'm mad at you, so I'm not going to be, your emotional covering. I'm not going to be your emotional support. And, I often say to victims and survivors when I'm counseling them, when the one that God has called to provide and protect becomes the predator, we have a problem. We have a problem. because that is not the assignment. And so that is the enemy at work. And so I'm so grateful that you were able to spend this hour with us, and I hate that it's over. And so that just means you have to come back and spend another hour with us. And maybe, you know what, when you come back, we can talk more strategically about some of the things that we can put in place in our faith communities, not only for the victims and survivors, but how do we help our leadership? Many of the leaders in faith communities, the reason they don't speak to any of these things is because it is their story. And everybody's staying away from the stuff that is my story. I always say, if I'm still smoking cigarettes and somebody comes to me, Pastor, you think I'm going to hell if I keep smoking? No, baby, you're going to be all right. It's going to be okay. Because guess what? I'm still smoking cigarettes. So if it's your problem, you're not going to talk about it. And so you haven't been delivered yourself. It's not an area that you're going to be comfortable having a conversation with someone. So please come back, Dr. Wendy, and do this with us again and spend some time with us. Thank you, Pastor Hobbs, for coming. As always, Deacon Jerome and I appreciate you so much. We can't do this without you. And we ask you to be on every show. I'm not sure this is the way it was supposed to go, but we love having you and we love your input. So that is our time, but the show will be available so you can watch it on YouTube. And so we invite people to call in or to send information to Boston Praise Radio. If there's something you would love for us to talk about, we would love to hear from you. We welcome the opportunity to take on any subject matter. We got an opinion about everything, so bring it on.